Welcome to Your Family's Health, the program that focuses on healthcare issues with unique and different modalities for taking charge of your health today. Experts talk weekly with our continuing roster of guests from around the country and right here in Nassau County to keep you up to date on the latest health issues and trends. Take care of your mind, body, and soul. Spend the next half hour with the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC, and get on the journey to better health.
And hello and welcome to Your Family's Health. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard from the nursing department here at Nassau Community College, along with my co-host, Nassau Community College student Keith Garbarino. And today we're talking about food and nutrition, what everyone needs to know. My guest today has been on our show before, and we still had so much left to talk about that we decided to invite her back. Please welcome Dr. P.K. Newby, who is a nutrition scientist and gastronome, an author who has been studying, teaching, and inspiring healthy and sustainable eating for 25 years. She was one of the best undiscovered cooks on ABC The Taste, where she created globally inspired plant-based cuisine, and she is an Adjunct Associate Professor and award-winning educator at Harvard. Her latest book is Food and Nutrition, What Everyone Needs to Know. So, Dr. P.K. Newby, welcome to Your Family's Health on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to come back again.
Wonderful. So, tell us about being a nutrition scientist. What exactly do you do?
What do I do?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I think what I do now is a little different from what I used to do. And of course, that's why I'm here with you today, because I spent my career researching why what we eat matters from farm to fork, including studying the relationships between diet and chronic diseases like obesity and heart disease. And then I also looked at how people make food choices, and that sort of is related to the social, behavioral, and environmental factors like the food environment that shape our diet. And then I also looked at how those choices impact our environment. So after doing years and years of research, however, I became really passionate about being more involved in science communication. So today I spend more of my time communicating what we know about diet to people like you and to people like those listening online with us today. Because what good is sort of science if it isn't getting to the right people? And I think that there's so much noise out there, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that I think it was important to have more scientists directly participating in today's important food conversations. So I spent a lot of my time writing books and, doing interviews and doing talks all over the place. And I've been on book tour for the past number of months.
So, Dr. Newby, you are a nutritional scientist. So what makes you different from a nutritionist?
I started calling myself a nutrition scientist years and years ago, and it kind of caught on. And I think because when people hear nutritionist, I think a couple of things. One is they tend to think RD, or registered dietitian, and an RD has a lot of benefits and has a good deal of knowledge about nutrition, but it's totally different from a scientist. So what's a nutrition scientist, or someone who is a scientist, has a scientific degree and usually a doctorate. So nutritionist doesn't usually clarify to people the level of education that I have. And it's an important distinction when you're asking people for diet advice, and there's so many out there giving it that don't have the proper background. And nutrition is a science. I mean, ultimately, it's biochemistry, right? How what you eat impacts your body is biochemistry, physiology, metabolism. And very few people giving nutrition advice have that background, whether nutritionist or nutrition scientist. So that's kind of why I like to call myself a nutrition scientist. I have a doctorate in nutrition. I also have 2 master's degrees in behavioral sciences and also in the environmental sciences aspects of nutrition, like what I was talking before. So it makes me quite different from other people talking about diet.
Yeah, with this whole organic type movement, you see so much information that it gets overwhelming. You don't know exactly who to listen to. So back to your mantra, from farm to fork, what we eat matters. That's wonderful. And can you explain a little more about that?
Well, sure. I mean, we all think about nutrition and diet as impacting our own health, right? So weight is a huge thing, as is preventing heart disease and diabetes and stroke and all of that stuff we want to steer clear of. And again, that's what I spent a lot of my career researching. But it's diet and nutrition isn't just about you, right? What we eat impacts society. It impacts food producers, who's growing our food, and what is their health like, and what is their standard of living, and are they being paid a fair wage? And then what about the foods we eat? How are they impacting our global and shared environment, right? So we know that how we eat impacts our climate, climate change. And more than that, it impacts our food, it impacts our land, our water, our air. It utilizes precious natural resources. So fortunately, in the past, maybe 5 or 6 years, climate change has really increased in the public eye. And so people are increasingly making the connection with what they eat and how it impacts not just their own body, but with the broader environment and the climate change and our physical environment, the planet in particular.
So from the mantra from farm to fork, one would think that it is best to have a plant-based diet or be a vegan. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's what the science suggests, and I always like to differentiate that because none of these things that I have are an opinion. My opinion is what the science says, and the science says the plant-based diet is most sustainable for humans and the environment. So yes, absolutely. But I'm glad you made the distinction and put in vegan too, because it's plant-based. So plant-based, plant-centered, plant-forward, but that doesn't necessarily mean vegan or even vegetarian. The more plant-based, certainly, the lighter your environmental footprint on the planet. We know that for certain. But that having been said, that's not going to work for everyone, right? So I'm knowing how people make food choices and knowing the realities, especially for tons of people that don't have the choices, right? So people who have less income and all of those things don't have the same kinds of choices to necessarily become vegan or such. But it's certainly true that the more plants you can add onto your diet, the better your own health is going to be. And again, the lighter your footprint is going to be, and not just carbon footprint, right? Water, you'll be utilizing less water too. You'll be utilizing less fuel. So you're using a lot fewer precious resources that are going to run out if we don't take care of them.
So with the plant-based diet, do you advocate for growing your own garden, or are you advocating for finding foods or vegetables or plant-based foods that are organic?
Well, let's start, because you also, the question about organic came up, a few minutes ago. So let's talk about that. Organic is a choice for many of luxury. Okay, so it's a choice of privilege, and I like to talk and think a lot about privilege. And you have a collegiate audience here, so I think hopefully people there will be with me on this topic. And I know, of course, you reach the community too. But even thinking about what we should eat and making the best diet choices for ourselves and our planet is a place of privilege, because there's billions of people around the world that don't have those choices, that don't have enough to eat, that are malnourished. And I just want to throw that out there, and including here in the U.S., that just don't have the ability to answer these questions. And I just wanted to say that to introduce the concept, because it colors in what I'm about to say about eating organic. Okay, so organic, there's lots and lots and lots of research to show how organic agriculture, sustainable agriculture, is better for the environment. Okay, it allows the soil to restore itself. It nurtures the soil. It doesn't overuse it so that it becomes barren and the like. So unlike conventional agriculture, so farmers employing and food producers employing sustainable methods, what is also called agroecology, by the way, organic methods, are better for the environment. So therefore, people should choose that if they can, if they're able. All right, so that is one thing about organic. But guess what? If people can't afford organic, I still want them to eat more vegetables and fruits, because we know that is an important part of a plant-based diet. And by the way, grains and all the other things that can come organic too. But I want people to eat plants, and so that might come in the form of conventional, if that's all they can afford. That might come in the form of fresh, if they're able to go to a farmer's market like I am. might come in the form of frozen or canned, hopefully low sodium canned. Those are great sources of nutrition as well. So it's just not one size that fits all. That's so important when dealing with people. So just to say that everyone should eat organic, for those that are able to make a choice, absolutely. It's better for the planet. And guess what? Who it really matters? For farm workers. Because farm workers who have constant and high exposure to pesticides and fertilizers and the like in conventional farming, they do have poor health outcomes. So if, for example, if I'm in the position to be able to afford to buy organic food, then I certainly want to do that because that's a better choice for the environment. It's a better choice for the food growers. And hey, maybe it's even a better choice for me. But there's not a lot of research to show that eating organic is better for an individual person in terms of a nutrition standpoint.
You're listening to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHBC. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard from the Nursing Department here at Nassau Community College, along with my student co-host, Keith Garbarino. And today we're talking to and about food and nutrition, what everyone needs to know. My guest today is Dr. P.K. Newby, who is a nutrition scientist, gastronome, and author who has been studying, teaching, and inspiring healthy and sustainable eating for 25 years. So, Dr. Newby, could you just tell us a little bit about, I know, Keith, I have to say, Keith, tell us about what your diet as a nursing student could be or can be. I'm not picking on you, though.
Well, lately I've been kind of interested in health and noticing stomach aches consistently and lack of energy based on, high fast food, lots of pizza, lots of caffeine. And so I took to some research about like a non-grain-based diet, lots of vegetables, lots of meat, and like fruit, how does that affect, like inflammation, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, I always love to characterize.
That's a loaded question.
What is, well, no, I was going to say, what does science says? So again, my thoughts, and again, I just think it's important. I'm not trying to nitpick the words, but again, in an area like mine where everyone is full of opinions, to me, when people ask me opinions, sort of like, what do you have an opinion on gravity? Well, gravity happens. Science is science, whether you believe it or not. So let's talk a little bit about the science. And again, as I mentioned before, Dr. Cook-Garard, you should feel free to just jump in because I'm a professor and long-winded. And that's a big question you just brought up because you brought up a lot of different aspects of what you're eating, right? So you already know that fast food is, such a reality for many people. And there's healthier and less healthier choices that one can make for fast food. So I don't think we need to belabor that because I think everyone out there listening knows that. But let's talk about, I think, one of the things that will resonate with a lot of people, which is, avoiding grains. And my question, and it's up to you, Jeanine, if you want to make this a back and forth, but why would you give up grains, for example? So we know, and before you answer that, think about it for a moment.
Okay.
But so there's a lot of hype around gluten-free diets, and there's a lot of complexity there. And by the way, this is why my book, if you don't have it already, would be really helpful because it covers all this. And there's 134 questions and answers about all of these kinds of questions that you're asking. Everything is in there, everything you want to know. That's why it's such a great series through Oxford University Press. And of course, what is gluten? Is it important? How important are whole grains to diet and that kind of things? Those are the things we're talking about. And there are scientific answers to that. We know that not everyone needs to be in a gluten-free diet. It's gluten. Gluten is just a protein, and actually leads to some beautiful properties and bread and grains and all the things that we love to eat that have wonderful texture. Those beautiful French baguettes, the elasticity, that's due to gluten. So for people who don't have problems with it, they tend to cut out whole grains, which, by the way, are an enormous source of valuable carbohydrates, which is the preferred energy for our brain, a lot of B vitamins, many minerals, fiber, which most people don't get enough of. So when people cut that from their diet, well, what are they replacing it with? So I'm going to pause there because then I would just go on to your next thing that you talked about. But let's start with that. So why would you give up grains?
Well, we're going to pick that up after this quick break, Dr. Newby. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard from the Nursing Department here at Nassau Community College. and I'm here with my co-host, Keith Garbarino, and today we're talking about food and nutrition, what everyone needs to know. My guest today is Dr. P.K. Newby, who is a nutrition scientist, gastronome, and author, who has been studying, teaching, and inspiring healthy and sustainable eating for 25 years. You are listening to Your Family's Health on the Voice of NASA Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Teens in foster care will love you, even if you don't know the lingo.
Dad bod, noun. The result of the occasional donut, always washed down with confidence.
Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council. Visit adoptuskids.org.
We now return to Your Family's Health on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Thank you for being with us today. This is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard from the Nursing Department here at Nassau Community College, along with my co-host Keith Garbarino. And today we're talking about food and nutrition, what everyone needs to know. And my special guest today is Dr. P.K. Newby, who is a nutrition scientist, gastronome, and author who has been studying, teaching, and inspiring healthy and sustainable eating for 25 years. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Newby.
Oh, thank you. I can't wait to continue our discussion.
Yeah, so
we left it a nice juicy
This is a juicy one. This is a real juicy. So you left with talking about a gluten-free diet.
Right.
And so it's not for everyone. Gluten has its wonderful benefits to the average person. But would you say that there is an increasing intolerance to gluten in the community? Definitely. Are you hearing that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's been, for sure, I mean, scientific studies have shown that celiac disease has increased, and gluten, kind of intolerances certainly also appear to be on the rise. But, there's a lot of ambiguity about what exactly that is. So for a lot of people are just diagnosing themselves and deciding that's the culprit, but actually it could be many, many other things.
Right.
And, so that's where it gets to be tricky. So what we know is that, it's about 1% or so celiac disease and maybe 6%, maybe less on intolerances. But then you think about the large percentage of people picking up a gluten-free diet. And again, other studies, we're still talking about science here, have shown that, again, people who cut out those whole grains tend to replace them with less healthy foods. Mm-hmm. So for the vast majority of people, when you think about all that research together, a lot of the people following gluten-free diets don't need to be, and probably would be better looking to some of those wonderful whole grains.
So how do you make the differentiation between whether or not I have a gluten intolerance or whether I'm just bloating because I've had a lot of fiber?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, again, we're not here to diagnose anyone over the radio, of course. So people need to go, there's lots of different reasons. And actually, when you talked about an RD, that's clinical stuff that someone needs to figure out with their physician. They need to figure it out with a nutritionist. They need to look at their own reactions. If they're serious about it, here's, though, for your listeners, measure your food, do a food diary. I have a great piece on my blog called, Be Your Own Dietary Detective, which means that if you're trying to figure out what it is that ails you were talking earlier about your stomach ache, for example, then you want to figure out what's the culprit instead of just getting rid of foods, right? So a lot of people find keeping a detailed food diary for a couple weeks or an elimination diet is going to help people understand what it is and how it's affecting their body. So there's a number of things people can do to help figure out what works for them. And of course, for those people who have a true allergy or have a true, celiac is an autoimmune disease, then people would need to know that, right? Because you don't want to ruin your whole GI system due to gluten.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about? I'm sorry for interrupting you. What are your thoughts about water? Should we take in alkaline water, filtered water? What?
Or alkaline water? Oh, that's a Trader Joe's was I think sued about that claim because it's so silly. And also I'd like to bring up again that these are such questions of privilege. And that's another thing, again, I feel very, very passionately about. I mean, there's between 1 and 4 billion people worldwide that don't have clean water, that don't have access to water, and water transmits diseases or who die from dehydration. So the fact that we're kind of sitting here talking about water is water. We need water. And guess what? when we're thirsty, we'll drink it. We don't need an app for that. We don't need to count to 8. There's no research to show that's important. Our body is excellent at recognizing when we're thirsty. So I'm going to start with that. And by the way, about 20% of our water, or rather hydration, our water needs come from foods like vegetables, fruits, all of those watery foods. And the other 80% comes not just from water, but from coffee, tea, and such, right? Because they all contain water. So just the notion that we need to be counting glasses of water or need to be that fixated on it is really kind of silly. The body is great at telling us when we're thirsty. So that's the kind of and of course, this is all in the book. How much water do we need? Is the 8 glasses because a myth, and it is. So getting back to this alkaline, no, I mean, water is water. We don't need to worry about that. And then, by the way, I'd rather more think about, for those of us who are lucky to be in a place where we can use the tap, unlike Flint, Michigan, which has been, right. Where you're forced to use bottled water. You drink water from the tap because it's so much better for the environment. We're privileged to have a tap where you have clean water. There's between 3 and 7 liters of water used to create 1 liter bottled water. Think about that. And the plastic and the fuel. People should not be using bottled water. It creates an incredible amount of plastic waste that end up often in our oceans and utilize a huge amounts of resources. So water is essential for life, obviously, right? But just drink water when you need it, or know that for the most part, those of us who are already healthy adults, or it's probably a lot of your listeners, are getting enough water. I could go on to more clinical situations, but I don't want to continue kind of lecturing about it. But there are certain situations where people need to think more about hydration, like older adults who kind of forget to drink water. But for the most part, we don't have a problem with water here.
So I got another one, because I'm a student. I don't sleep that much. I'm up late. I go to bed late and get up early. I'm sure you do the same. You sound pretty busy. So what about coffee? Some of us need it daily. Is that something we can still get our little Dunkin' and Starbucks fix? And, how do you feel about that?
Well, so the science shows, much science shows that coffee has lots of health properties, right? It's one of the most antioxidant-rich foods we can eat. So it's great. It also contributes to hydration. It's been shown to be inversely related to risk of type 2 diabetes. We also know caffeine does good things to brains in certain situations, not to all brains, but the fact that it heightens attention and concentration, that's good things for students and for lots of people, right? So coffee is known to be healthful. Now, caffeine is also a drug. So, people who have sensitivities need to be aware of that. But the coffee is great. I'm drinking black coffee as we speak during this. But again, so what are some of the other things? And let's come back to the theme of from farm to fork. So again, we're talking about your diet and that it's natural place for people to think about their diet and how it affects their health. Let me challenge you to think about something else. Okay, first, so you mentioned, Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks or whatever. First of all, are you bringing your own mug when you go there? And these are just questions, right? They're food for thought, because otherwise people are just contributing plastic waste. Secondly, who grew that coffee? Okay, so coffee is a place where there's known to be issues with regards to overproduction, so that it kind of, when you read about like shade-grown coffee and that kind of thing, so overproduction can damage the land. So how is that coffee grown? Is it organic? Is it conservation friendly? Is it fair trade? Right? All of those things, and you can learn about these, matter. So especially whether you're bringing it home or you're buying it at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or wherever you're going, to me, those are the questions that also really matter, because then that helps me decide, well, what coffee should I buy? Because I want my coffee habit to support good things in the world beyond my own coffee fix myself. And again, that issue of waste. And of course, I think it's obvious to your savvy listeners that once you start adding sugar and cream or a whole bunch of other things, and suddenly your coffee drink isn't as healthful as it would be. And it's a good point to point out that it's possible to train your palate to enjoy black coffee. And it's another thing that I talk about in my book. And by the way, it's not January anymore, but it's still the beginning of the year. And a lot of people think about changing their diets, right? I think that's part of why we wanted to have me on again. And I have a free ebook on my website, which is pknewby.com/books. And again, I'm highlighting here because it's totally free. So I wrote it just to help people, creating a healthy and sustainable diet. Or really, that's not even that. It's creating dietary change. And I have sort of 7 steps that I outline that are key. And by the way, measuring your diet, as we were talking about a while back, is in there too, because you can't try to change your diet if you don't know what needs changing, Mm-hmm. So I want to just, let your readers know that that's a resource. And, obviously people can go to my book too, because all the things that we're talking about, the coffee, is it good or is it bad? Or, gluten or water, it's all in there. And that's why I was so happy to write this book and have it with Oxford, because it's their format. So this isn't about my ego right now. It's their format that's Q&A. But I said, I got to have this Q&A book because it's all about questions, right? People have all these questions and they're all in there.
So I have to ask the big question. The question that I have is, should we eat meat? I mean, for those that are meat eaters, are we concerned with, antibiotic chicken versus farm-raised fish versus, tell us what we should be doing in terms of our meat consumption.
Well, there are a couple of themes, and again, as redundant as it is, your questions are all great, and they're complex. They're not confusing. Nutrition isn't confusing if you go to science, but it is complex, and that's why each of these, farm versus wild, grass-fed versus conventionally raised, antibiotics, they're all separate issues in the book, and they all deserve more time than we could give them here. This is why when you ask me these questions, I have these long answers.
That's fine.
Let's take a couple simple ones. I can't touch them all, just too long. One, we already talked about the importance of plant-based diets, right? So therefore, to answer your questions, we know animal-based diets, or including animal foods, isn't good for animals, and we know that whether that is good means something to your listeners or not. We can talk about the environment. We know that it's more damaging to the environment. It's many, many, many times more food and feed and water, more fuel and feed and water to create a pound of beef, even compared to pork versus chicken versus that, soy or versus your grains. So we know it's much more intensive, and that's part of what's creating a lack of sustainability in our food system. That's fact. That is a fact that's been shown and discussed by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations for a long time, and including by a recent report even a couple weeks back, showed the same thing. So we know that a plant-based diet is best for the environment. And the thing is, can meat be part of a diet to a small degree? If people would like it, I'm not going to, again, I want people to create a sustainable diet they're going to be able to stick to. But most of us consume far more than is good for health, especially with regards to protein. And I want to touch upon another important thing, which is antibiotic resistance. So we know that, antibiotics are overused and used incorrectly in the raising of animals in conventional factory farming. And that is contributing to the antibiotic resistance, which is a growing epidemic that actually you guys in nursing, you're going to see more and more as the years go by. And it's thought to be an epidemic that will affect 10 million people in 2050 if it's not intervened upon by the CDC. That's their estimate. It's going to be a huge issue, and meat is a major contributor. So these are just a couple reasons off the top of my head. I mean, here's one more. Processed meats are known to contain carcinogens. So many reports have thought that people should limit their consumption of, or avoid, by the way, limit or avoid completely processed meats. So there's so many reasons to reduce meat consumption, if not eliminate it, not least of which is we know we can get nutrients elsewhere. So, dairy and meat, are they nutritious? Of course they are. They do provide nutrients, but you can find them elsewhere without, that's better on many, 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 many fronts.
So this has been a fascinating interview with you, Dr. Newby, and thank you again for coming back. There's so much information that we can glean from. Thank you for being here again. The author of Food and Nutrition, What Everyone Needs to Know. We certainly learned a lot about our diets and what we need to change to get healthier and to stay on track. This is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard from the Department of Nursing here at Nassau Community College, along with my co-host, Keith Garbarino, nursing student. And we want to thank you for listening to this week's edition of Your Family's Health.
We'd like to get your feedback on your family's health. Send your comments by emailing them to whpc@ncc.edu. Podcasts of today's show are available on iTunes, Android Podcasts, and Spreaker. This program was produced at the studios of Nassau Community College in cooperation with the Nursing Department. Join us next week for another edition of Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.